Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Wednesday. He's literally just shown up in the chat. Here he is. It's our guest, Stephen
You just
Conway.
it's like you dived onto the stage just as the curtain was lifting.
like three-quarter bottle of Jack in his hand. Like, yeah! Here, babies, let's start the show.
I like to make a grand entrance. What can I say?
Yeah, that's true. Anyway, good evening, everybody. It's Wednesday. It's time for another Hub Games Hangout with me, the sweet boy of international tabletop gaming, Michael, and James Fox over there. The inevitable, the indomitable. Is that even a word? I'm close enough. Rory O'Connor. And our special guest, the beautiful human being, the Spielmeister himself, Stephen Conway. Hello, Stephen. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. How are you gentlemen doing?
Cool. I mean, normally we would have done like rando catch-up stuff before the show started, but we're just going to do it now as part of the show, so it's all cool. It's all good.
So yeah, Stephen, we normally kind of like chat about like what's been happening in the last week, what we've played, but I suppose before we start, it's worth just kind of introducing you to people as well. If you want to take a few,
sure.
Well, take your time and introduce yourself.
And just shamelessly plug yourself.
Take your time, but hurry. I get it.
Yeah, because you're not going to get another chance for the rest of the show, so do it all now.
Totally
and then again at the end.
So my name's Stephen Conway. I am the host and founder of the Spiel and the director of the Spiel Foundation. The Spiel started in 2006. The foundation started in 2007. And the foundation has now absorbed the Spiel, so it's all one giant entity. I run a not-for-profit organization that's an international charity, basically, that's focused on the power and the positive influence that play can have on the world. We do that through various different means. We have the media network, the Spiel, that we broadcast a variety of shows that a variety show that basically has an in-depth game review, and we have a cavalcade of lovely contributors who submit segments as well. And it focuses on board games specifically and card games, and kind of shows how that's one aspect of playfulness. Another way that we do it is we kind of follow our mission is through our game bundle program. We assemble and prep and donate bundles of 5 games to different organizations across the US, Canada, and hopefully when everything settles down, Europe as well, and we're able to kind of reach our tendrils out into other parts of the world as well. We started with children's hospitals and senior centers, and to date we've actually covered every children's hospital and every nationally accredited senior center in the United States with one of our bundles. We started in Canada last year, and we have 2 whole provinces. All the hospitals in 2 whole provinces have some of our bundles, and now so we keep setting our sights kind of higher and higher as we go, and we actually have opened up the bundle program to libraries, schools, boys and girls clubs, shelters, women's shelters, homeless shelters, and eventually even prisons. We're doing a lot of research on how to bring play to places that might be a little counterintuitive, I think, to why it might be useful. And so that's another way. We're also building a center for play here in Indianapolis as a kind of base for our operations. That's our big, bold plan, is to have a place here to call our own, and to be able to, by gathering all of our kind of resources into one spot and all of our energies, we can kind of branch out even more into the world and do even more good with this idea. So I think I've blabbered quite enough. That's enough about me.
I think you've blabbered quite beautifully there. Congratulations.
Well,
it's very obviously, we've met each other many times over the years, you, me, and Rory, and it still weirds me out to see you like with your mouth moving and that voice coming out of it, because the voice is like a very regular thing in my head, listening to the Spiel podcast and everything like that. But yeah, sort of like live interaction, this is a rare and beautiful experience.
Agreed.
So I just want to say hello to Zayt and Yas, who've joined us as well on the chat. Two of our regulars as well.
Hello.
So yeah, it's funny. We go back, I suppose, a bit because Bernie, who was I think say kind of mentor.
Yeah, he moved to Indianapolis in the mid 2000s, like 2005, right after the Spiel, actually, like 2008. And I just got this random email. Hey, I'm Bernie DeKoven. I think we should know each other, and we're going to be really good friends. And boy, was he right. Boy, was he right. It just was, the rest was history from there.
Yeah, so I suppose I got to know you because Rory Story Cubes way back in the day received a Major Fun award, kind of from Bernie, and then this was again with holding on the Triple Life of Billy Kerr. We received a Spiel award from you guys as well, which still cheers me up every now and again when I read it.
He stares at the website for a solid 30 to 40 minutes every day, just filling up his emotions barrier, carrier. It's all good.
And I think that's something to kind of come back to, because that idea of we've kind of similar interests, I think, with regards to play and its wider role in the world. But for a few moments, we just get to talk about what we've been doing, kind of usually about anything interesting that's been happening over the last week, games you've played, experiences you've had, like driving around all the libraries in your area, I saw.
Yeah.
So yeah, what's been happening for you in the last week?
Well, winter has hit in full force here, so that's kind of Mother Nature has dictated a lot of our actions. We have about a foot of snow on the ground at the moment, and of course, there's our landline ringing in the background. So enjoy that for a moment. Stupid. Like never rings, and of course now it rings. Should be done after. Stop. Yes.
Wow. No.
Oh no mastery over the situation.
So yeah, we have a foot of snow on the ground. It definitely has affected everybody around here. I mean, we're used to snow in Indiana, so it's a huge deal like it is down in Texas and other places where they're just scrambling to try to survive. But last week, as part of the bundle program, we have a rented warehouse as kind of a stopgap measure for not having our own home yet, and we have almost 12,000 games, 11,000 plus games in stock. And it's just me, because of COVID, going through and prepping all the games and getting everything ready, which is just every time I go in, I'm sort of like, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? But I have a friend, Bernie's daughter, Shale Weidenbach, actually works for the Indianapolis library system. And so we've been working on a deal where the foundation would donate bundles to all of the different branches of the local library system. And I could see the weather coming, and I could see they're stupidly opening up the libraries to the public, general public. I have no idea why. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. So I was like, you know what? I should just get these bundles in place beforehand, because I can just put on my mask, load up my car with games. And it was a really fun tour around the city, and took a couple days, and drop them off and go ding dong and sort of ring the bell and go, here are your games, and run out to my car. And
it's like like a really positive ding and ditch.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
You call it a ding and ditch? We'd call it like a knick-knack.
Every place calls it something different.
Yeah.
Every generation and every place will have a different. Like, Stephen, what would you call it?
I would have called it a ding and ditch. That's what I would have called it, actually. That's weird.
Weird. This is sort of like small corner of northwest London that's somehow inextricably linked with Indianapolis.
I have never heard anyone in England call it a ding and ditch.
Nah.
I don't understand yours, Rory. Where does that come? That doesn't make sense to my brain.
I've a feeling it has a horrible connotation that I'm not going to mention. Michael might get it.
Well, another one. My brother called it knock a door run.
Okay.
That's very literal.
Yeah, it's literally. He's not very intelligent.
By the time you finish saying it, they've opened the door and caught you.
Yeah. like a very weird game, very weird. But no, it's yeah,
But
it's
that's what
that's cool. I mean, you're sort of like a slightly late Santa Claus, just traveling around the libraries of Indianapolis, going, "Hey, here you go." Okay. So, what games are actually in the bundle then, Stephen? What can folks get, and how do you get them as well? Like, are they donated? Do you actually buy them?
Like Zaid has pointed out, like we've started this show running, and
I mean,
we don't normally do that.
True.
So-
Normally, there is a very sort of like chaotic energy at the start of this show. So yeah, okay, let's just
Which
chat
is
rubbish
funny,
for a few minutes.
on every other podcast, I fast forward past this bit to get to the content. So it's kind of ironic that I enjoy doing this bit. I can see now why people do it because it's kind of fun. So yes, so before we get back to like, have you been playing games over the last while, Stephen, or has it all been kind of work?
Over the last week or so, let's see.
That's the last while. It doesn't have to be the last week. Because
because of, I mean, you have to play games, right? I mean, we are who we are. So if we find ways, it's harder since it's just Francie and I to play games. The two of us, because her taste in games is not super limited, but it's harder to get some of the heavier things to the table. But I've been working on a setup, multiple cameras, so that we can. I can include my pal Doug, who's the co-host of the Spiel, and we're able to at least once or twice a week play more complicated games online. It's a big pain. And it's, for as much joy that comes from playing games, there's a little aspect of work that is like, man, shouldn't this just be fun and not the slog that it is to get to the fun? But you got to do what you got to do. Let's see. Castles of Tuscany has hit the table quite a few times in the last week. Wonderful Stefan Feld game. I play a lot of cribbage. I have a little webcam cribbage set up so that you can play remotely, which I love doing because it's the kind of thing where we can chat and play. So I do a lot of that.
Okay. The Game of Champions.
Oh, and the other one, this is a game I just got from Japan called You're a Penguin, and it's a stacking game sort of akin to Rhino Hero, Super Rhino, however you know it from Haba, but has some extra little wonderful twists and tweaks to it, and the components are just absolutely genius and wonderful. All different sizes and shapes of wooden penguins. So.
God, don't let Steph know that there's another animal stacking game out there.
How about you, Paul?
Rory, what's been on your table?
So, since we last spoke, I played a remote game with a 3-camera setup of Test of Honor, which is a Japanese themed, like feudal Japanese skirmish game. Which, if anyone follows me on Facebook or Instagram, they've been seeing me post about it. So I set up and played with Erin, who used to work with us. She's back in New Hampshire. And so I set up the table with the cameras, and she sat and had her like cards in front of her, and we basically played, and she directed me where she wanted the characters to move. And it was actually barely noticeable. It was as if we were in the same room together. Like, it was really good fun to play. And I think the size of the game area, which is like 3x3, you're playing with probably about no more than 10 figures, even less each.
10 each,
very easy
or
to manage, and because
10 total, or 10 aside.
But 10 aside, but you'd have like 3 on a stand, so essentially that's kind of one. But the rules are simple enough, like it's really straightforward. So you just get into the gameplay and the narrative, and that's what we were having lots of fun of. That's the one thing we both really enjoy playing games, which is just the unfolding narrative that happens, and that we create or emerges by the dice roll that happen in the game. So we played that, and also played card capture, which I sent you the link earlier, Michael.
You did, yeah.
It was a winner of the 2018 Solo Game Design Challenge, and it's essentially a deck builder using a standard deck of cards.
I have my deck here ready to play.
So it's really interesting.
I think I need to know about this.
Yeah, so it's a really simple idea. I can actually almost like quickly explain the game to everybody who's watching.
Do it.
Right? So you take a deck of cards, take a deck of cards. The objective of the game is to acquire all of the face cards, so Jack, Queen, King, and Ace, from an enemy kind of deck pile. If they ever move across the market and end up in the discard, you lose, right? So you got to mitigate that. To construct your deck, you take all the 2s, 3s, 4s, and 2 jokers. So you should have a 14-card starting deck. And then all the other cards form the kind of enemy pile, and you create a market of 4 cards. If there's any of the face cards in that, you shuffle them back into the deck. On your turn, you would basically fill up the market of any empty cards. You can discard any cards you've still got left in your hand and draw back up to 4. And then you will basically spend cards to buy cards or capture cards from the market. So essentially, you're matching the suit and the value to buy the card. So if you have like a 4 of hearts and a 2 of hearts, you could purchase a 6 of hearts or lower from the market. If you have jokers, they basically double an existing card in your hand. So that's your main option, is you want to try and buy a card added to your discard. If you can't do that or don't want to do that, the last card in the row basically captures one of your cards. So you have to remove the last card in the market and 1 card from your hand and remove it from the game. And the other option is, if there's a card you really want to kind of keep in the deck, you can essentially kind of block it by removing 2 of your cards from your hand to move the card on the rightmost side of the market to the bottom of the deck. So basically 3 things that can happen. And if any of the face cards ever end up in the kind of removed pile, you immediately lose the game. You win if you've captured all of the face cards into your deck. So yeah, it's quite straightforward, and it's a really interesting way of teaching the concepts of deck building and that idea of thinning as well, because you have to do that as well. I've played it twice so far because I just printed out the rules yesterday, but it's nice that it's played with an existing deck. So I'm trying to kind of like wean some of my daughters off solitaire and get them to try something else.
I just put the link to the BGG page in the chat for everybody. So whether you're on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch, you'll be able to grab a look at it yourselves. But yeah, I really like the idea of it. Apparently, there's a couple of like online versions as well that that have been coded, so you don't even need a full deck.
Why? Like
why? Yeah.
Why would you play it online when you can actually play it with a deck of cards? Like, they made it as easy as possible for you to play it.
I mean, true. It's very true. Anything else, Rory? Or is those sort of like that's your main things?
I think I've been busy getting my butt kicked in Marvel Champions, trying to beat Ultron. My other play. I'm trying out the decks that we've acquired recently to give them all a spin. And yeah, Wasp was pretty good, but I still haven't. I'm gonna have to deck build to deal with Ultron. I can't do it with the pre-existing deck. I
am yet to break open the Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver ones yet. You'd have thought I'd have been completely on it in like next to no time, due to the fact that like WandaVision is taking over pretty much my every waking thought. But it's like there's just I hate to say it, there's too much content in it. But I love it because it just means I'm going to be playing it for ages and ages and ages. So it's fantastic. Ken says that Jeff Goldblum is needed to fill out the ant/wasp/fly trio, but that can't happen because Jeff Goldblum is something else in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So, shut up, Ken. I don't know. I still need to have a look at those decks that you suggested, Rory. The like the Moon Knight one and some of the others.
Oh, there's a Magneto one has just come out. So Stephen, I don't know if you've played Marvel Champions or if you're.
I haven't yet. No.
So I think it's a pretty neat deck builder, but it's got a really active fan created content for it, and they review the decks. And so, are you a comic book fan?
Oh gosh, yeah.
So there's a Moonlight deck that came out recently, and it's pretty incredible because it uses personas and it actually encourages you to keep changing personas throughout the game. You get benefits the more times you change personas. So that's kind of really interesting. And then Magneto just came out, and I like so what I like is how they're really trying to recreate the characters through the mechanics that are available within the game. So in this one, you remove cards from play to power up effects. And Magneto is really powerful. So there's nothing kind of weak about what he does, but it's quite costly what he's doing. So he comes in and just like blows stuff apart. And it's like at whatever cost, he'll achieve what's needed. And so a lot of that is with the timing of kind of ramping him up to do really big, powerful stuff towards the end of the game, but you're also getting rid of really important cards every time you're doing it as well, which I think is an interesting dynamic.
I feel like
Ken is here to. Oh, sorry, after you, Stephen. No, I was just going to point out something else.
I feel like that's true in what is it, Marvel Villainous from Ravensburger. They've done a really good job. It's not as ornate because the decks are smaller, but I think you can tell that people who really love the source material are marrying that love to the mechanics of the game. And if you're familiar with that source material, it's like, oh, that's so perfectly done. Like it's a light touch, but it's the right touch to add those elements to the thing that makes it sing in a way that it would just fall flat if you didn't have those elements, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've mentioned it here on stream before, but the fact that the Ant-Man card flips open, so it's like it's giant, it's a double-sized card, just makes me absolutely squeal with joy. The first time I saw it, it's just like, it's so good. Ken is here to argue that Chris Evans plays two characters and Olivia Munn is two characters. Yes, Ken, they're in different multiversal areas.
We're going to put Ken back in the corner again. Our families play games, have asked. So the Magneto deck,
it's just a UK thing. You can only get it in the UK, just in the UK.
Yes, it's a fan content deck that you can find on BGG. So you just have to print it out and sleeve it and give it a try. Now it breaches all kinds of copyright in terms of like image use, but technically they're not making any money from it. So I guess that's probably still in breach.
Yeah. I mean, it's not exactly legal.
Yeah.
It's whether the eye of Sauron points towards them, right? You know, lawyers don't care.
Very true. Very true. I'm trying to work out what I've been playing. I've not actually been playing that much because I've been working on a couple of things just to get them up to speed for Ravensburger pitch that I've got on Friday. So I was just trying to get a couple of games just exactly how I want them before getting them done and dusted. But yeah, there's been a lot of, lovingly looking at cards and going, oh man, it would be really nice if I could play this Marvel Champions. Also tidying up my games collection and stuff as well, and attempting to, and trying to sort out this apocalyptic disaster that is this room after moving to the all-new Studio 2, which looks very similar to the previous Studio 1. Although Roy did also drop off 12 copies of Combo Clash to me earlier today, and it's sort of like I was just sort of like sitting there thinking, I'd love to actually get a game of this in because it's been a while.
So yeah, it's our new game coming out in April. Our spiritual successor to Flip Over Frog, and it's a ton of fun.
Excellent.
So it's going out to reviewers at the moment.
Ken got a delivery. He actually called me earlier on today to show off his big package. as he had the Millennium Blades huge box. He's just got a copy of Kubitos, which is cool. I mean, like, Millennium Blades is big enough at the best of times, but this thing is the size of, like, Gloomhaven, I'd say. It's massive. It's absolutely huge. Wow. But I believe it contains, like, literally everything that's ever been released for it. But yeah, it's fantastic. Very, very, very cool. It's a great game. We should play that again when we're allowed to.
Yes. So, one last thing I'll add is actually I've been involved in the tabletop mentorship program, and had so I'm working with 2 mentees and had my second meeting with one of them yesterday, which is really interesting, helping them with negotiating licensing agreements. And I realized the fact that I sat on both sides, both as a kind of game designer licensing out, but also licensing in, trying to strike a fair balance for both ends, has kind of taught me a thing or two of appreciating what's needed. But it's like, I was going to say was it poacher turned gamekeeper, or the other way around, gamekeeper turned poacher. I feel like it's gone both ways. Yeah.
No, isn't it meant to be like you're going from, like, the dark side to the legitimate side?
Yeah, but being an inventor isn't the dark side.
I mean, some would say that we mess around with dark forces, creating our strange curiousness.
So we should probably jump into the conversation. And I have to confess, I am freewheeling this one because I know interesting conversation is going to come out of this. So don't let me down, Stephen.
No pressure or anything. That's fine.
If you talk long enough, I'll pick up on something and we'll spin it from there.
I'm putting you in the prime position on screen as well, Stephen. So, like, big focus on you, mate.
Yeah. So I think, like, we share a common interest, and both in the work of Bernie as well in the past, the kind of value of creativity and play. And I kind of got into the game industry because of creativity and creative thinking. Like, my background was essentially at the time I was a creativity coach and facilitator, and interested in using creative problem solving to help people think differently about themselves and their world. So it was like one-to-one sessions and team-based work. And Rory Story Cubes came about as a creative thinking tool initially. And if I had to hold on to one thing in my life, it's play. Like, it's not games, it's the concept of play is crucial to me. And I've never massively dug into that, like, as to what that means. So I'm kind of, this is my therapy session where we get to explore that. But I think the term is used a lot in kind of games where we play games.
Yeah.
But I don't know if everyone is really thinking about play in that way when they play games. So I kind of wanted, that for me was kind of like the starting point for this conversation about like, what is play in the kind of like the broad sense of things, the benefits of it, and to explore that in the context of games. Are we playing? Are we getting like a tiny sliver of play? The concept of play when we play games, and maybe, what games do it really well. Really broad stuff. But I think starting off by talking about kind of what play means to you might be a good starting point, I think. And hopefully it'll encourage people in the chat as well to kind of throw in their thoughts as well. So yeah, easy, go.
Yeah, you picked a subject that I can haul forth on pretty easily anytime. That's the.
So I'm just going to get into my play. So I'll be back in a little bit.
So, I mean, we definitely are kindred spirits. I think you, me, Bernie DeKoven, we all look at the world through maybe a set of lenses that allows us to see the world in a playful way. I always describe the general sense of play as kind of a stance or a posture with which you can approach the world, that you can see it writ small on a tabletop, but you can take that way of looking at things and apply it to things well beyond the boundaries of a game or a table. And those lessons that you can learn in terms of being able to have the freedom to make choices and see that there are consequences or different decisions, and make a different choice. And kind of sort of the game is sort of a experimental lab for play, right? With where the consequences are small and not really meaningful, right? That even if you lose, big deal. But the play has that aspect of freedom, though, too. That even the verb play, right? Things have play, or not the verb, but the word play has connotes a sense of looseness and lightness and kind of freedom to it. That if a steering wheel has play in it, that to me starts to describe a greater way of approaching the idea than simply something you do at a table. And I think it's hard for people who think of play as the domain of children and something you grow out of, that this is something that, that's well and good, but there has to be a moment where that that switch flips, and you put those things away and you move on and become a normal human being. That I rail, I can see you clenching your fist because I do the same thing. And when I say my life's devoted to a international charity that promotes play, you get a lot of eye rolls because of that. People thinking that it's one thing when it's a much broader, I think, expression of our humanity. I mean, that's probably a little grandiose, maybe, but I don't really personally feel like it is. I feel like it's a muscle that you can learn to flex. That the more you use it, the more powerful and the more positive you can see that influence with the people around you. And there's kind of, you can ripple out from there.
And so it's funny because I was just thinking that word of like flex and flexibility, and the idea of, like you mentioned, play in the wheel. That to me is a core part of play, is to not just look at something as the way it's presented to you.
Yes.
So, and I kind of think back to what I would consider like my absurdity, like of constantly like reinterpreting and misinterpreting things, and essentially playing with the intent of something. And I've joked on here before, like when I would do it in the States in particular, and people would correct me thinking I had made an error. And then I'm like, I have to explain to people that I was playing with something, but I'm like, that's too much hassle to explain to you. So yes, okay, you're right, you've corrected me. Because poor me didn't see things properly. Whereas to me, that kind of play or playfulness allows you to kind of like, you're standing here, but you're shifting perspectives and moving around the thing and seeing it from different angles and seeing the different connections between things. But like, kind of, where's my hand? Like that, it's like really rapid the way it's happening. And it's because you've been essentially training and exercising that the whole time. And to me, that's the key part of play, is to not get stuck in, I think they call it like functional fixedness. Yeah. That this is the way things are and this is the way things should be because this is the way it's presented to us. Sorry, that's my rant.
And you also managed to kill half the multiverse, so congratulations.
Well, just be grateful, Ken, you're still here.
It's like chat just goes like down by 50% immediately.
Sorry.
I think you can also see how that play, it's a willingness to see that the rules are always kind of fungible. And if you look at beyond just like us as game crazy people and looking at it from the world of games, I think, if you look at science or math or all kinds of things, it's that the people who end up making discoveries are the ones who are willing to play with well-established, assumptions about the way things work. And to me, they're playing with those ideas, right? They're actively engaged in play. And that's where it's that mindset. It's that stance that you approach the world, that they go, well, what if it wasn't that way? And that so many things come from that playful attitude of being able to go, well, I know the rule is X, but what if it wasn't? and just following that. And there's a lot of dead ends. It's not like everything comes out roses when you do that, but you're willing. It's more about the willingness to try, right? To have that extra layer of freedom to just sort of tread water and maybe flounder a little bit to give yourself the chance to find those things.
And I'm sorry, I'm trying to look at a shelf. I can't see the book offhand. I'll have to dig it. But there's a book about it's kind of like innovators or change makers. It's not the correct term for it, but they basically look at like what's common amongst these people. And in their teenage years, largely speaking, they were people who would brush up against the bounds of rules and law. And they said, so they would often break the law, but never in a way that harmed other people. So, yeah, I was like nodding furiously, like, I've gotten into my fair share of trouble. But it was never at the expense of other people. And they said, and that was the critical thing. It was like they refused to accept things as they were and would constantly kind of test it. But know when it's like, yeah, okay, I don't want to push any further here, but there was a willingness to push up against it rather than like staying clear of the fence. You're the one like poking it to see, is the hole here.
Oh, that does shock me.
But not a lot. So maybe I can do a little bit longer. Yeah. I find it interesting, Stephen. You mentioned sort of like the linguistic element of play, like the whole, as Roy brought up, like the play and the steering wheel. Because a lot of times when you think of play, like I'm going to sort of like say your average adult will very much consider play a childish pursuit, a childish endeavor. And I was just having a look, like there's a quote that I really like from C.S. Lewis. When I became a man, I put away childish things, including the fear of childishness and the desire to be very grown up. So it's just sort of like, it's just giving himself permission to be, do you know what? It's all right to be, to sort of like to indulge in those childish pursuits, because I was talking to Steph about this before I came upstairs to start the stream. And it's like a lot. There's sort of like this almost sort of generational like period where people will say, "Okay, you're no longer a child. It's time to put those childish indulgences away. It's time to start paying a mortgage. It's time to start, being a serious, proper grown up." Ken mentions it in the chat as well. So like the literal first thing that his mother asked when he graduated college, when are you selling your board games? And it's just like, it's weird because there is sort of like this split of people that like the groups definitely go in sort of like two different ways. There are the people who still are happy to accept play in their world, whether that is something as simple as, once a week we're going to sit down and play a board game with each other. And then within that group, there are people who will then expand it out to, things as wild as incredible thought experiments, or as you said, sort of like, playing with what happens if rule X is actually rule Y in science, that sort of stuff. But then down the other path is the people who are literally like, no, there is no play. Play is a bad thing. Play is for kids. And I can't get a mindset of that kind of person. I can't recognize why that kind of person would put themselves in that box, I guess. What do either of you think is like why would they go down that route? Or have they been forced down it, do you think?
I think it's institutional and societal pressure that push it. Cultural, it certainly varies from parts of the world, but I think there's an insane amount of, in the West, cultural and institutional pressure to look at play in that negative connotation once you reach a certain age, that the life is serious and it should be about making money and being successful and defining yourself by a certain set of rules that put it over here. And that I think a thing that my dear friend Bernie did with so much of his life was understanding that one of the keys to unlocking that mindset, I think, Michael, is showing people, giving them opportunities to give themselves permission to play. to say that it's okay to play and to give them a path back to that. Because I think you're institutionally kind of taught lockstep that is the way that things go. And so I think we're the outliers for a reason, because we've at a early or young or whatever age have, said, no, wait just a damn minute, and stepped back to look and saw that there was great value in it. But I think unless you have that, I don't know that it's like an epiphany, you have to have a specific moment, but unless you've had some sort of discovery along the way, I think it's unfortunately easy for me to see how so many people have that mindset, but they're not forgotten and lost. And I think that's what Bernie's point was, that we are playful creatures at our heart, at our soul. And you just have to just sort of unlock that door and just go, look, you can walk right back through that any old time. It doesn't have to be a game. It doesn't have to be anything. You can play anytime you want. You just have to give yourself permission to do it.
I have so much to add to that. One of the things, Michael, you talk about the kind of two groups. So the first thing I would challenge is that it's more like a kind of continuum that people exist on. So that's that. Give a little bit of room for play, because I also think in there is the people who actually stay. It's kind of like the man-child idea, that there's people who kind of don't want to face, the reality of life and stay in a playful state. But it's a moving away from something, and the idea is to carry play fully into the reality of, and all of the challenges we face of life as well, rather than the movement away from it. So I think, sometimes that category gets kind of forgotten, and it's like, hey, look at us, we're great for playing, and it's like, well, it can become unhealthy as well, like almost like an addiction. I have a really great story of an example of this, like of play and creativity. When I used to do creativity training, because my whole thing, having studied with Win Wenger, who passed away last month, he was teaching Socratic method, and essentially about drawing out your own insights and awareness, and really effective. Like if you think like using a kind of playful way to get to answers quicker than you can trying to do it logically by just like thinking hard about something. And I was running a workshop, and I was teaching this guy, probably in his he was in his early 20s. He was about my age, a bit younger at the time. And I showed him a technique using something called the Inner Vision Deck, which I had created, which was a creative problem solving tool. And it was designed as a deck of cards because it was really not scary. Like just, it wasn't woo-woo creative stuff. It was like, no, you shuffle this deck of cards, you pick a word, you use that as the basis for problem solving. And he was trying to solve a problem about how do I generate more sales. He ran a car leasing, worked with a car leasing company. And using this problem solving method, he came to the insight that, you know what, I should spend my Friday afternoons just calling around our existing customers and chatting to them, because that's where I get most of the work. Right? So I was like, excellent. But I was watching him going, you're not going to do that, are you? Like, what's stopping you from doing it? And he was like, yeah, no, I probably won't. And I was like, but you have said that it's going like, this is like the best way to get more sales for you. And he was like, yep. And I was going, so what's stopping you from doing it? And he went, it doesn't seem like work. And so like in our culture, I think various things happen over time between growing up in a kind of a strict religious structure, which is, and societally, it's kind of like, to keep everything running, you need to follow the rules, right? Because if you step outside, you make it difficult for us to manage, you know, and it's kind of how cities developed. So I think a large part of it was you got to keep people following the rules. And so that was kind of drilled in, follow the rules, don't try to do stuff yourself, because we want to keep things running. And then again, I think, and I'm going to throw it out largely from my experience, the kind of Protestant ethos of religion and church and work is like, you work hard and you kind of get your rewards after. So there's this idea of like, sacrifice yourself now for a reward later in life or in retirement, which is how a lot of, you know, we work on organizations. So it's kind of been drilled into us, this notion of play isn't of use. So just set that aside and do the other stuff. And that's why I kind of say there's that sometimes that personality of rejecting that and retreating into play, which isn't necessarily healthy either. So I think we're trying to meet needs. Like a lot of people, when they can't see the value of play, it's because they're trying to meet needs in a different way. And it's maybe needs for acceptance, belonging, you know, to kind of do the right thing because that's what they've been taught. And for them, play doesn't fit into that category. Sorry, that's the rant over.
No, I'm down with that rant. I mean, so Rory, obviously, you and I we had a talk earlier. We were chatting about my uncle who passed away at the weekend, and because I didn't get the opportunity to be part of the funeral and all that sort of stuff, you decided, bless you, for taking it upon yourself to okay, we're going to do a wake for him. So our wake was we're going to have a coffee standing outside in the cold. But I was sort of telling you about. I did offer
to have something stronger. I just want to point that out.
I know. But I felt like a coffee was the way forward. If we were going to do it properly, it would have been the strongest, stand a spoon up in a cup of tea to make it proper.
I would have been up for that.
Yeah, we'll do it again in the future. But I was talking about how my uncle didn't really get the idea of play. He didn't really understand how I could make a career out of the world of games, because he very much he left school when he was 13. He ran a farm pretty much from that day until he passed on Friday, and just didn't have that, I guess, that accessibility to the things that I've had, I suppose. And I find it a little bit sad, I guess, that somebody that was very close to me, somebody that I love dearly, didn't have the opportunity to it's not like I wish they could have done so much more with their life, because good Lord, he was happy. He loved farming. He loved doing the stuff that he did day in, day out. Hard work, but he took it in a stride every single day. But then I sort of go, is it bad for me to sort of say, I wish that I could have explained better? I wish that you could have experienced this idea of play being okay, because he was very sort of he was goofy as hell, but he was very serious in his life, and I never really saw that opportunity, that aspect of play inside him. I think Ken says, he didn't have the capacity for it because it was just never available to him. So, Stephen, you mentioned there's always a way for somebody to walk back through the door. But what if you've never had the opportunity to walk through that door in the first place?
Well, I mean, maybe I'm speaking in too broad. Maybe I painted with too broad a brush there and say there's always a way. But I would contend that when he was a boy or younger, that he understood play on some level, that he probably as a kid there's sort of a almost genetic component to how babies learn and how we actually become functioning people. That's play is a part and parcel component of that, and there's kind of a expression of joy that comes along with that learning process from a very early age. So I would say that in that respect, I think we all kind of have a kernel of that somewhere. I've had not exactly the same, but I was expected to be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever because I did super well in school, and I can't count the number of immediate family members and on who thought, oh, you're wasting your life doing this stuff, that this is a complete waste of time. And the only way that I could find to get through to them was to have to just sport was a way that unlocked it for a lot of them, because they found joy in watching other people play, and they understood, they could see the value in that, because that's a part of, we've sort of societally accepted that kind of play and said, well, that's okay. That's acceptable. You can do that because it can be like a profession and people can make money off of it. And there are leagues and things and trophies and whatever. But there was at least a little crack in the armor that I was always able to kind of go, well, I know you like basketball or football, and I actually like sports too. And so that was a thing that I could show them, because they had a frame of reference that maybe wasn't my choice of reference, but at least they had a way to look at it and go, oh, well, if it's kind of like that, maybe I can see what you're all about.
Okay, I can take that. It's
I think,
yeah, it's just a strange sort of like way that my brain went down, odd path as usual.
Rory?
Just in relation to the sports, and I'll come back to your uncle. It's interesting that like sport has been institutionalized where it appears on the news daily. I remember listening to a podcast about this, and I think it might have been Radio Lab, but it was like, if you think about it, like other things aren't covered in that way. Like we don't hear the latest news from like sport, from like chess tournaments or like other events, but in terms of sports, and particularly in the UK, like with football or soccer, you're going to get the report coming in of the team results. So to some extent, like that's almost like sanctioned play.
Yes,
it's kind of, I can definitely see that. Yeah,
where that's the acceptable play. And you can belong to that, and so interesting. Maybe that's like where people get their outlet, where they kind of go drift to that, because it's like, well, I can be part of that and it's deemed acceptable by the wider society. Sorry, I'm making this up as I go along. But it is interesting that, like, if you were to mentally play with that idea, what if that was something else that was getting reported? Like, well, in this weekend's Magic the Gathering tournament, James Colback came out first against the up and coming, player.
Well, you are kind of seeing it's a very slow glacial shift, but stuff like esports is getting more and more, legitimate coverage, I guess, is probably the phrase I'm looking for. But, when you can switch on, BBC Two, broadcast television, and watch people playing League of Legends for hundreds of thousands of dollars of prize money, that's definitely sort of like, that is, that feels almost like a next level of play as a sanctioned thing.
Yeah, I love,
which is delightful.
I love having that conversation. So I know another parent nearby. He has a nephew who is a competitive player and was kind of scouted and was moving over to the States to play. I think it was Call of Duty was his game.
Okay.
And he just could not understand it. Like, he was like, Rory, how does this thing work? This concept. And I was trying to explain, it's kind of like, when you watch a football match, you take great pleasure in seeing someone playing really well. You're not playing the game, like you're crap at it, but you're watching this other person and the skill of how they're actually working. And I said, there's a degree of that. It's just that person isn't physically moving around, but they're using eye-hand coordination, mental processing to achieve similar results. And he was like, oh, yeah, okay, I can kind of get that, and I think esports is actually one of the ways of, more than board games, I think, being able to bridge that gap for people as a kind of spectator sport.
I have a funny little anecdote that kind of speaks to that. So Gen Con takes place here in Indianapolis when it can, and the professional football team has a stadium that is right next to the convention center, and they often have, the season is just ramping up as Gen Con is starting, so there are preseason games that happen that are sort of practice games, and there's usually a day where there's a preseason football game happening during Gen Con. And so you have this confluence of two different game-obsessed people.
Very different fandoms. Yeah.
They're going, I can't even understand. I can't even imagine how these people are. I'm like, you're two sides of the same coin. It's just beautiful. It's awesome to see that you have this shared passion, but yet somehow there's so few people that can kind of bridge that divide and see you are the same in so many fundamental respects, that what you're doing is lovely and wonderful, and you should actually be like walking arm in arm, not pointing and laughing at each other. But the difference is one is societally inside the fold, right? And the other's kind of like, yeah, you can do that in your mom's basement.
There was that thing when we were there at Gen Con last time, Rory. There was one night where now there was no preseason football game, but obviously there's the baseball stadium is right next to the convention stadium, and if I ever get the chance, I always try to go to the game over that weekend, because it's just a really nice place to chill out. But on top of that, there was also a music, like a live music festival happening as well at the same night. So there was 3 different very, very big fandoms converging, and just like utter chaos, humanity everywhere, and all 3 of these groups just like staring at each other going, what are they doing? And it's just like, obviously we're the best ones here, but what are they doing, weirdos?
Everyone's thinking that.
So, Ken says it very well. Everyone geeks out about something, and we just happen to geek out about different kinds of play, I guess.
So in terms of play, and this is where there's always some point in the conversation, Stephen, where I can't quite formulate something and I have to talk until I work it out. This is that moment. So we were talking about games and like rules and playing with rules. And it got me thinking about how when we play games, we're playing with someone else's predefined rules. But there's something weird going on, because when you play, you're willing to bend those rules. But there's people who are like, no, you have to like follow these rules exactly the way they're presented, which is kind of a little bit against the spirit of play in terms of the experience. And so it's more just something to talk about that, like rules, I know, and boundaries are an important part of play, but it's when people, again, they can't move outside of that boundary. I'm just wondering if you've kind of thoughts or reaction to that.
Yeah,
I can see you physically responding.
I would say the reaction I first have in terms of you saying it's outside the bounds of play, I would say it's outside the bounds of expectations for games, not play.
Yeah.
That we, because we think play and games are the same thing, that's why there's that resistance to it. And I guess maybe if you think of it in terms of playfulness as opposed to play, that there's a playful way that you can approach things that is sort of a, here's play and here's playfulness. That playful attitude is what allows you to tinker with the game and make the game should suit the players. And if the game has failed at a fundamental level, I think, if it isn't addressing the playful needs of the people that are sitting playing it. And so often that's what gives rise to, what if we do X or this, because the game isn't satisfying something. And so you push against that to make the game fit the expectation you want, even if the doxified game that came to you in the box, or a game that you just made up, didn't fit it. You're going to push at that to try to make it better. And I don't feel like that's against the spirit of play. I feel like that might be against the spirit of games. That is a small subset of things, but play encompasses that by a huge margin, and then playfulness even maybe beyond that. And that's my shot at it.
I think that's what I'm trying to get to, is that when people say they play games, it's acknowledging that that's a subset of of
Yeah.
play, and it, but there's often people who won't, like, even though we play games, they won't transition outside of that. Like that, it's like, that's as far as I'll go.
Yeah.
And
Well, Rory, could you say that it's codified play versus freeform play? Like it's play within a rule set versus play outside of a rule set. Are we as grown-ups able to actually do that freeform play? Because like when I was a teacher, I'd go out into the school playground and I would see the kids, playing, and they're just, running around, freaking screaming, shouting, having an awesome time because, that's the best time of the school day. But for us, well, okay, I'm not going to say for us, but for me personally, playing is sitting down with a controller in my hand and playing a video game, or sitting down with a bunch of cardboard and plastic in front of me. I'm playing within a rule. Yeah, I'm playing within a set of rules within a world that somebody else has created. And we've mentioned that previously. But I cannot ever, 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 for the life of me, see myself running around a playground at the age of 45, pushing kids into puddles because I will get arrested. So does the need for play switch from freeform play into codified play as we get older?
I'm sure you've commented, Steve. I think codified play gives adults permission to play within that structure. I think like running apps like an Empire and the zombie one is kind of like trying to give you permission to be a little bit playful. When my daughters were younger, we invented this game to play to make sure they got some exercise, and it was essentially Super Mario in the real world. So we would walk around the park, and we would say if you ran.
You told me about this before.
So you would like run and jump off a tree stump and like go bing, you'd get a star. And if you ran along a log, you would collect stars, and it was just like any old excuse to collect stars. But if you gathered enough stars, you got a hot chocolate at the end of the walk. But it would make them run, and I'd have to do it as well. So because I'd be kind of showing them where they were.
Yeah, because you want your hot chocolate, of course.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, like as an adult, I'm prone to kind of like embarrassment. But I think from having done some street theater, like I am quite shy as a person. But I will intentionally put myself out there in spite of myself, and sometimes do those things because I imagine how strange other people are going to find it when they look at me doing it. I'm like, I'm going to mess with their heads.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of a little bit mortified. Like, I just go, they're going to feel more embarrassed than I am. I might be doing this. That's why I'll
basically everything Rory does, it is just for spite, just to spite humanity.
You would not believe how much of what I do is for spite.
Aqua in the chat says the codifying lets the play become more cerebral. Maybe the thing adults cling to with games and sports is that A, there's an outcome, and B, it gives the play significance. Okay, that's an interesting point to think about.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll come back to dexterity, like that idea of play and cerebral. But you do what you were going to say, Stephen.
Well, I thought what Michael might have identified, you talked about the continuum earlier, is maybe that is, it's not either or, but there's a continuum. And to me, it's not that the 40-something-year-old or 50-something-year-old is going to run around the playground, but there's this imaginary playground that's here that I think can affect the way you just approach your walk-a-day life, that doesn't have to involve you going out onto an actual playground, and allows you to have the freedom to see the rules, not every rule obviously, but many rules as things that you can push or poke in a way that we just sort of walk through life with them being codified, and well, that's just the way they've always done. And that, I guess, when I'm talking about the playfulness that adults have, it's more that mindset that allows you to, if you want to go bonkers, like Rory, you can, but you can push it in more subtle ways. So I think it's more of a continuum than that. And the thing at some point that before we stop, I wanted to ask you about serious play, because Billy Kerr certainly pokes at play a totally different way, I think, than anyone has ever been daring enough, I think, to try. You guys deserve a lot of. I had questions.
I was going to say, what if I want to go on the swings and the slide? You
Go.
know,
Do it.
I'm not allowed. There's a little fence around them, and there's a sign that says "Children only." This world is keeping me down.
Well, we always say to the and I think this is a core part of play. Like we say, I always make a point to the girls, like, rules are generally there to help people until they don't. Right. And you have because sometimes I know a lot of people who've grown up who reject organized anything. Right. And we're seeing that kind of play out under the current circumstances, I think, with people's attitude towards masks and vaccines and stuff like that. But where it's almost to the point where I can't actually I'm being given some helpful guidance and I just can't follow it because I'm so used to not trusting it. I can't follow along. But there's an element of being play, and it's that thing of kind of going, it's okay to follow rules when they're helpful, but when they're not, to kind of push against them and see, do they still hold or are they useful, so that I think you make an informed decision yourself around that. But you're not structured one way. Either way is we have to follow the rules, or I can't follow the rules, because I can't trust anybody. Neither of them is helpful for you because you're always against something. It's kind of playing in that middle ground where you can kind of be willing to test it a little bit.
And interesting that you actually use the word playing in the middle ground to to actually say it. I mean, I think if there's one thing we discovered is that in Michael's world, everything is black and white and there's only ever option A or option B. Apart from all the really important stuff.
So I actually wanted to come back to Aquasilus's point about play becoming cerebral. I think, Michael, we had this conversation about reviews of Mega City Oceania, where there's this context, I think, and it's quite often in the reviewing of games, is that cerebral is okay and dexterity is somehow less than. And it's because I've been training my brain to be super smart, super quick, and fast at calculating things. I want to show that off. But I haven't really been working on my dexterity. So you know what? Those games are kind of lesser than, because I'm not very good at them. And I would kind of go, well, I probably spent I don't feel like that about strategy games because I struggle with seeing my brain running down that pathway to work those things out. But when it comes to dexterity, I'm yeah, I've been working on that quite a bit over my life. I'm fine with playing a dexterity-based game. But in the reviewing, quite often in the reviewing and the commenting, the kind of cerebral is placed higher. Sorry, I'm mirrored. The cerebral is placed higher than the physical and the dexterous. And I'd love to see that kind of being addressed within the world of games. It's kind of why we made Mega City Oceania, is to try and bring the two together in some kind of unholy matrimony where you get to exercise both. And the person who is good at dexterity can actually beat the strategic person, but the strategic person does have an avenue to beat the dexterous person as well.
Yeah. I mean, with Mega City, I've often said that I don't care if I win or lose Mega City. I designed it, or co-designed it with Jordan. But for me, the victory comes from making just awesome, beautiful buildings. Yeah. And generally, my in-game game is I just want to make sure I got the tallest, most awesome-looking thing.
And Stephen, actually, you'll appreciate this. The whole concept behind Mega City Oceania is tricking people into play. That was yes. when we ask why should this game exist, it's if we can trick adults into playing with little bricks and constructing stuff, I'm it's done, and let's just wrap it in a veneer of a Euro game to keep people happy.
I think that with several of your games in different ways, that it's about the process of play much more so than the final eventual outcome, that you're driving to a point. The point may be different from game to game, but the sheer, like we talked about it, permission to play, right? That's what Oceania is, right? It's sheer permission to just play with games, and the joy you're going to get from it has nothing to do with I won. I would contend in that game for sure, that you've shifted the focus. It's still a game you play, but it's a game that highlights the journey and not the destination in a way that, most games it's, well, did you win? I don't essentially care. I mean, in many cases, I want to play well, and I want to have moments that I remember that were good out of the game. Looping back to your dexterity idea, do you think that is a form of, dexterity is the realm of children? That there are light games, that it's if it's a family game and there's almost a what's the right word? I'm struggling here, but there's sort of a hierarchy that we're establishing, right? That up the top are the super high strategic games, and down here, those are all well and good, and those are nice, and we can pat them on the head and send them on the merry way. But that, there is this hierarchy that seems to be about serious adult play versus childlike. It feels like
definitely.
There's that divide there
but
to me.
But it's a weird reinforcing loop, because of kind of like the gatekeepers of the world of games and the reviewers tend to be more cerebral. So therefore they want to play cerebral games. So they kind of laud the cerebral stuff as somehow like subtly being better than the other. And they've just spent more time working on that stuff. It's like they don't realize they're leaning into something because they've naturally spent more time developing that, or they live in a society or culture that celebrates that. And I love seeing games like where you play Super Rhino or Paku Paku or something like that, where it's like, you guys are screwed. Because you see kids just, or like same with pattern matching. Like there's this really weird thing. Children, like young children, but pre-literacy, are incredible at pattern matching.
Yeah.
And our youngest daughter, she got Rubik's Race for Christmas one year. And she was like that person sitting like in a casino or like in a bar where you go in and you try to compete against them, and you lose all your money.
You just get mad hustled.
Yeah, she was like that, and it wasn't until she started reading and she went back and played the game, and she was like, "What happened? I used to be good at this." And like Tony, a friend of ours, was actually like adult, was finally able to beat her, and we were like, oh yeah, that's because before you were operating purely on pattern matching. And so you were able to play Rubik's Race and like see the pattern and solve it quicker than any of us could, because our brains were actually running slower because of our like the literacy that we'd developed.
Rory, I've always been gutted that you never got to go to BGG that year, because BGG has obviously I think we didn't get to go to the one where they moved, but when they were in the old location, there's outside of the halls in the sort of like the big lobby area, there's always a setup of lots of very beautiful, weird, and wonderful dexterity games, and some of these huge things, and some of them are like completely and totally unique. Like there's literally like one copy of this on Earth, and it comes out every BGG. And BGG for me is always like a celebratory show. It's not the last show of the year anymore. That's PAX Unplugged, but it did always feel like the end of the world tour for the year, and this is where we all got to hang out and party afterwards. And while there is definitely like a joy from victory in a more cerebral game, the things that will stick with me, I have two very, very big memories of. Actually, no, I have three very big memories of BGG. Number one is like the shouts of joy of just people playing these games about knocking a ping pong ball around a wall by using this weird sort of rubbery device. Like, and just like there's 15 people watching it and going, yeah, you could do it, buddy. It's just sort of like just totally weird. Another one is 3 o'clock in the morning watching a bunch of very, very drunk people in the main hall playing Super Rhino Hero Giant Edition on ladders, which is freaking horrifying. And then number 3, probably the biggest and weirdest event, is the Battling Tops Luchador Championship extravaganza, which, you know, Battling Tops is a game that there is zero freaking skill in it. But there is literally 300 people in this lobby screaming and shouting at each other, just playing. Yeah. And for this sort of like this event that is very much centered around this very, you know, this cerebral pastime where we all put ourselves forward as like, we're super smart people because we play board games. And then all of a sudden there's like, you know, 300 plus people dressed up in luchador wrestling masks, hurling tiny bits of plastic at each other or trying not to fall off ladders, balancing like, you know, A4 sheets of card on top of each other. It is a beautiful celebration of play as opposed to playing games. And, yeah, it would be awesome if we actually get to go again and you get to experience it for yourself, because I can see you spending joyous hours just farting around with these beautiful dexterity games, because every single one of them is so different and they're just filled with joy. They're so good. So good.
Michael, I know have you participated in the Spielathon since we changed to the carnival format, or did you only do the trivia format? Because
I did the last trivia format and I did the carnival one. I did the first carnival one. And having people come up to me and just trash talking them. Yes. Like, yeah, I'm gonna beat you at this. I'm gonna smash you at this game.
This will sound like a shameless plug, but really is germane to the discussion here at hand, because we shifted from, we do fundraisers called Spielathons all over the place when we can. And the format that we've settled on is basically a celebration of play, just like what Michael is describing. It's a 2 to 3 hour event, and then a final round where we invite celebrities in to play pattern matching, dexterity, all kinds of just games that a 5-year-old would kick your ass at. And it's a welcome to all players. So kids can play, parents can play, anybody can play. So you'll have people coming from having played the heaviest, you know, war game, and then sitting down at the Spielathon to play, you know, I'm trying to think of
Lupin Louis was the final.
Lupin Louis, yeah, in the final or something like that. And the sheer unmitigated joy that you hear coming from these hundreds of people playing at because we have little game stations set up around the room, is just the perfect payoff, because the idea was to create this kind of perfect circle of play that people come and they pay a little to play with us so that other people can play. That it's like, this is what we're bringing to other people. That's what we're wanting to do with that. And you're already kind of preaching to the choir in the BGG con format, where, you know, you're already kind of more amenable to that. But I've actually run Spielathon type events in a more kind of general public, and it is amazing how much just hearing a few people's reaction to it is enough to gather a crowd. And then it's not too long before somebody says, well, can I try that? And well, yeah.
Yeah, the answer is of course. Yeah, do it. Make it happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I will always hold myself very, there's a small prideful place in my heart, the fact that I managed to guide one of the teams to a championship Spielathon victory on a trivia thing. But then when it went over to the physical game stuff, it's just like, now this is what it should be like, because literally anyone can play. You don't need to be a smart ass like Michael. Everybody can play this thing. I'm trying to remember what game I was playing. I think I was playing like a balancing.
It's like chickens. It was like chickens on a
seesaw.
Yeah.
And it was just sort of like,
boom.
I have no idea what the heck, but it was absolutely fantastic. Yoss is demanding that we do 8-player Steph Stunt Pilot, Lupin Louis. You can do 8-player? Like, I've seen 4.
They make custom rigs that you can build to kind of either put over the mechanism or just buy a new mechanism that'll do up to 8.
Damn, son. Let's go.
So the other point I wanted to bring up with Rory talking about the dexterity games and reviewers is that was actually one of the chief inspirations behind starting the Spiel, was seeing that there weren't, because we cover everything. We do games. I've written reviews on Super Rhino and other things like that, and people are like, what? How could you possibly? And to me, what makes those games work is super fascinating, because it's not, if you step back and look at what makes supposedly light games work and make them engaging, it's as cerebral an exercise if you step back and try to understand the magic that is in those games, because they don't all work. Some of them are like amazing and others just fall completely flat. And trying to figure out what the difference is, the salient difference between the ones that sing and the ones that are a little off key, is super fascinating, and just as much an intellectual exercise as taking on any kind of, big. In fact, I think it's harder because in the bigger, heavier games, it's sort of in the rules. And it's in the kind of structure, and it's the mental hoops that you have to jump through. And with the lighter games, you really have to be more introspective and step back and go, okay, why does this work? Because it's not it's not explained for you and just laid out for you to see. And to me, it's a harder job, but it's actually kind of one of my favorite things is to take those on, because we do a Major Fun and a Spiel of Approval every month. So we're always engaging with that sort of yin and yang there, because to me, there's no hierarchy. There's no hierarchy at all.
Like one of those games, dexterity games that I love, that was introduced to us by Pedro, is Paku Paku. We picked it up at, because when we've been working like a really long day at Essen, and we just want to go and chill out and have fun together, it's like we don't want to be reading massive rule sets. It's kind of how I picked up Super Rhino actually the first year. When it first came out, and then Paku Paku, and we were just like waiting for dinner to arrive, playing this game, and just the laughter around the table. And so it's actually got me thinking, like, what is it about that game? Like, it is really fascinating, like, that makes it work, because it's kind of got speed, it's got dice rolling, it's speed, it's got stacking, but the synergy of all the elements just makes it for a really interesting experience.
It's one of those golden games that sort of like the confluence of all those elements come together so well. Like, we'd like go for food. Like it's Nuremberg, isn't it? Where we played it last time.
I might have been. Yeah,
I remember we did play a game of it in Nuremberg because it was at the cinema restaurant with the amazing burgers and
yes
stuff like that. So there's a whole bunch of us there, and like there's all these people sitting around us. Probably most of them are in the city for for the toy fair, but we're the only table who's actually got a game out in front of us, just screaming at each other, just going, "Get the plates! The plates!" I think that's what play lets us do. It lets us be idiots in public with an excuse, and I'm entirely okay with that.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. I'm watching the time going, but I'm kind of curious if you do have some questions, because you're obviously used to interviewing people and talking to them as well.
Stephen, you mentioned you wanted to talk about serious play as well. So,
I want to hear from you all in terms of how you feel a game like Billy Kerr fits into this spectrum, this kind of continuum of games and play, because it is a game that we play, and I think maybe this is where we introduce the word fun too, because it's as broad and as mind-blowingly hard to really nail down as play in a different way, because I feel like maybe there's the divide in my brain. It expands the definition of play and even what a game is, to look at something like Billy Kerr and to say, hey, it brings the artfulness of what a game can be to the table in a way that people are not used to and maybe don't even have the tools to understand it yet, because it's right out there on the bleeding edge. But I'm interested to hear you all both talk about that the inspiration maybe behind that, and how you feel like the word play fits into, like, it is a game you play. Is it a game that you have fun with? Maybe not, but I feel like that play is even broader than that and encompasses, something. There's something to play that can go off in a direction that I think is so counterintuitive to most people, that is rewarding, that brings you an experience that you would never ever have had. And the only thing I can think of is I've had video games that have done that, that are starting to kind of go into narrative territories that you're like, wow, I'm literally weeping playing this video game. That just blindsides me. And I feel like that you've brought that into the world of the tabletop in a way that, just talk about that. I've talked enough. What?
Roy, do you want to handle this one? You're the sensible one of the two.
Okay. It's weird, like, for me, because I was actually just watching Ip Man 4 last night, and like I tend to watch stuff that makes me feel something or think something. Like, I rarely will just go, oh, that was half an hour spent, because in my life I'm like, I don't have time for killing time. So I kind of want to engage in things that kind of leave a mark on me in some way. And I'm highly emotional, like, in terms of like, I would tear up at the slightest thing, always as a kid. Slightest sign of like kindness or love or unfairness, I'd be just like and with Holding On, it kind of, there's a couple of things happening at the same time. I think This War of Mine was announced as a Kickstarter, and I remember getting quite angry, like, God damn them, and then going like, well, why am I so angry about this? Like, frustrated. And it was like, because I want to be making that kind of stuff. Like, when I saw the kind of pitch for the game, and someone was saying it made me make choices that I wouldn't have normally made in my daily life, I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And I just immediately went, games are changing, and I need to be part of that, because that's who I am. I'm not like the Story Cube's education guy that people think. I'm like, no, there's far more to like how people think is what I'm interested in. So it kind of got me thinking about where games were, and how the best analogy I could use when I was pitching Holding On to distributors, I was saying in the 80s, comics were entertainment, until we started to see the likes of Mouse and Sandman and Watchmen, which were still entertainment and still comics, but they were delving into territory that had never been dealt with in the mainstream. So, like, there was the whole underground comic movement before that, but in terms of mainstream comics, that wasn't happening before. And I kind of went, games are at that point where, and I was thinking of Scott McCloud saying, like, there's so much room for comics and different themes and genres to be explored. I was kind of thinking the same for games. And so, just kind of weirdly, there was a combination of a conversation with a Slovenian distributor who was giving me an idea for a game based on story cubes. And I kind of had this Don Quixote feel of like a journey in someone's mind, them going on this journey. And maybe because my mom has had Alzheimer's, it made me think of, oh, hang on, there's something really interesting here if we actually ground this in reality and do something around the immediate thought I thought was like poignancy, like, and the notion of sucker punching a player when they're playing a game. And I was just like, we need to make a game that sucker punches players. And that was it. Like, it was kind of show them that that's possible. And that was really the starting point. And so I think in terms of the game, the play aspect, we're presenting all this stuff of like, here's something for you to conquer and win using these rules, but we're going to take you on a journey. It's an excuse, essentially, to take you on this journey and experience something in a way that only I think a board game can, because I think what we quickly realized was no one was going to have the same experience with Billy because of the randomness in how the cards come out and are revealed. So you will see certain things and see him as a particular, well, you will project stuff onto him and see him as as a certain kind of person. But the game is constantly going to keep challenging that, and we try to speak to people that like connect with them in different ways that might be important to them. But essentially, the game is it's kind of like a sandbox for you to experience someone in a way that you never would in your day-to-day life. Like the odds of anyone in the world meeting a person like Billy, who is an amalgam of a lot of people I've met, you're not going to get to do that. And so it was like, hang on, we can create a playful experience that invites people in and essentially allows them to connect with other people in a way that they're not going to get to do it. But we wrap it all up in this game experience. That was the goal, is to kind of foster empathy through that, through a playful experience. And the difficult thing, Michael, you can probably talk to, is that balancing then of the journey we want to take people on, and how do we make that work as a game that's like interesting enough, short enough, simple enough to allow people to come back. Because I think that's been one of the, I find one of the kind of criticisms is the game seems too simplistic, which is actually a completely intentional approach.
Yeah, we definitely. I remember the early days of you sort of like coming to me with the idea of it, and I came up with so many weird and wonderful, fantastical concepts of like, hey, okay, yeah, so there's this one where you're shrunk down to a minute thing, Fantastic Voyage kind of vibe. We're flying around, shooting bits of plaque off synapses and stuff like this. And you just very much had the idea in your head of, no, keep it simple, like, pull it further, more personal, make it mundane is not the word I was looking for, but it's certainly one that I think is an apt and still positive description. But because it's you are putting yourselves in you're not heroes, you're not vanquishing villains, you're not lopping the head off a dragon. You are just people who you will you are putting yourself in the shoes of people who you may never have the opportunity to otherwise make that happen. And once we sort of like, we landed on this sort of the simple sort of thing of the morning, the daytime, and the nighttime shifts, and the idea of, okay, so we need to allocate members of staff and we need to do this. And I gotta say, like, I think it pairs very well. Like it shows the day to day, but also the fact that Billy is constantly ticking down. It also shows that you are on a limited timer. And we were trying to sort of like, we were trying to tell a story, we were trying to tell Billy's story for sure. But on top of that, we also wanted to sort of, I think, give the players the opportunity to experience a story of their own. The story of what would you do in this situation? Would you break that rule and not provide, and forget to provide physical care, that sort of thing, in order to make sure that you can do what the person wants, what the patient desires. I don't know. It was very strange, because is it a fun game? I say it certainly has fun moments. There are still moments when I look at that box and I go, I'll go through the different scenarios or whatever, and there are still bits, and one in particular that still freaking delights me every single time I see it, where you get in contact with a person from Billy's past, and it's just sort of like, yeah, when that bit pops up, it's just sort of like, yeah, super, super good.
Well, because I think in the prototype of it, and you've played the full game, I'm not going to give any spoilers, but there's a certain guy you meet from Billy's past. When we were playing that version of the game, we literally had like "FU" written on the cards.
Yeah.
That was their response. But I kind of wanted to point out, I think in talking about the initial idea, I think it's fair to say that because it was yourself and Patrick Nichol were working, we're kind of working together in the very early stages of the concept. And I describe it like it's like mercury, that I kind of felt like you couldn't quite grasp the concept of this is actually going to be serious. Like, and it has to convey that, because it would keep going off into these other areas. And that's where it was like, no, we want people to feel something. And it is going to feel sad, and it's going to be poignant. And I think there's this, like, you're a fairly upbeat, positive person, Michael, and I think there was this like natural there was that running away of kind of going, no, unconsciously go, no, I don't want it to be that.
Yeah.
And going, like, I hear you, Rory, and then going off and creating something different. And
yeah, it's like, but I still need the game to be fun. I still need people to have fun playing this. And I think once I bought into the idea of, do you know what? As long as it's got elements in there, like it doesn't need to be, bells and whistles. It doesn't need to be razzle dazzle showbiz. What it needs to be is experiential. And if I can slip some fun moments in there, because it can't, all the great stories, all the great movies, they're not bad moment, bad moment, bad moment, bad moment, sad, 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 sad all the time, because it's just crushing and nobody wants to experience that. Yeah, the game has a lot of sadness in it for sure, but there are those moments of joy, of breakthrough, of positivity that sort of temper it. And I'm super glad that we actually, we got those elements in there, because we came up to a lot of criticism making this game. We had the "FU, why are you making me feel feelings" comment plenty of times from people. But if we had gone down the, like, everything bad and nothing good happens in this game, Jesus, nobody would have wanted to have played it. It's hard enough finding an audience for a game about an old man who's dying and he wants to tell you a story anyway.
But that wasn't the intention. And like, for a story to have impact, it has to have those moments. Like, there's a black humor to it because of where the person finds themselves, and that's very indicative of the kind of Northern Irish culture, as well. And with Glenn Patterson, writing, I think captured that really well. I think what I didn't appreciate really was just like how hard people push against death. and the idea of even approaching it, whereas we talked about this a lot, Michael, growing up in Ireland. We kind of tried to wake your uncle today as best we could. There's an acknowledgement of death, and it's this weird grieving celebration time, because you get to be with people and you get to hear about the person, and it doesn't have the connotations of like just remove that from our life and like kind of remove it away so we don't have to deal with it. And I don't think I appreciated how challenging it is for some people. I've lost people close to me in many different ways, but it doesn't make me not want to play that, have that experience. But it's weird how many people are like, no, I've had death in my life, I really don't want that near me. Yeah.
Because for many people, it was and still is a door to be shut, a thing to be closed away. You do the funeral, you go to the service, they're buried, and then it's like the grief is hidden. The sadness is a thing that you deal with in the privacy of your own home, in the privacy of moments of you on your own.
Certainly,
but for us lot, it's very much, it's a different thing, I think.
Certainly not a subject to play with. But I think that to me is the subtle genius of this concept, in that you're to me, it feels like you're shifting the goal of play to something that's more akin to art than a game, because you even said it to begin your comments, right? You consume art because you want to feel something. You're looking for it to provoke some kind of emotional or intellectual response in you. And I think if you look at Holding On through that lens, that to me came through very loud and clear that this is not a game you're going to win. It's a game that you're going to experience and feel, and not, there's that terrible insult. Well, this is an experience and not a game. Not the case at all. This is redefining, that's reclaiming that idea as a positive and saying that the point of play can be for that experience. And that experience is going to be an emotional one that can embody all the wide spectrum of emotions. It deals with death, but that doesn't mean that it's all sad.
Well,
speaking to what Michael was saying about it, and then his point about mundanity, I would say that the other thing that I thought was a really lovely stroke, and to me shows the proof of concept to where I hope you guys return to this idea again and again, or other people pick up the torch, is that you've taken something that's, I wouldn't say mundane, but ordinary. You've taken an ordinary thing, but given us an extraordinary experience by seeing inside their mind, by seeing the memories and presenting it in a way that takes something that would otherwise be a completely ordinary thing. If you just say it out loud, you're like, how could that even possibly be compelling or engaging? But yet the experience that you've provided makes something that would otherwise be ordinary anything but.
You've read the back of the box, Stephen, because literally it's a game about the extraordinary life of an ordinary person. So I'll come back to something in like we asked the question, why should this game exist? We do that with pretty much everything we make. And with this one, it was when we were testing the idea with one of our team. It was just numbers and letters on cards and some rough text, like explaining what you're going to see on this card. And after she played it, this was Emma, who's on our team. She said, "This makes me want to call my grandparents." I was like, right.
You did it.
We have to make this game. Like, if we can make a game that makes you want to contact your relatives, it's doing something, and that for me was really like, who gets to claim that about a game? So that was a key part.
Just gave me goosebumps, actually.
I realized in terms of I was saying about the stuff I watch, it's not necessarily that I want to feel something, it's I want to experience the world from a different angle.
Okay.
Or perspective. I think that's a key thing. Like, I would never get to see this view of the world or see it from that person's perspective. And I think that's kind of what I wanted to show games can do. They give you that safe space to experience this person in a way that you would never get to meet them. And like that as a concept, we would hope to do more with that. Because you'd never, hopefully you'd play the game and go like, he's an ass, and it's terrible, and that you'd move through these kind of different emotions as things are revealed to you. But essentially, he's just an ordinary person doing the best that he can. And that to me is kind of a crucial part of life, is to show to people, you can call them whatever you want or make assumptions about them, but here's a chance where this person you get to see them laid bare. And make your decision kind of at the end of that. And hopefully it'll make you think about the assumptions you made earlier on. But if I tried to talk to you about that, I'm not going to get very far. So that's why the game is an invitation. Again, it's a trick. I guess. It's kind of like, hey, look over here. Like, win this game. Meanwhile, we sucker punch you with a different experience. That was kind of the goal of it, to invite people in and experience something different that they wouldn't normally do, but also kind of create a play experience for people who aren't interested in trading in the Mediterranean or the hot topic colonial games at the moment, and even necessarily kind of like light party games. It's like there's a whole world to explore of gameplay experiences. And like, we were looking at medical dramas, and crime dramas are really popular in games at the moment. Again, super cerebral, And we wanted to do something that would appeal to a different element, this idea of empathy and caring, as a kind of a core mechanic behind a game. And so that's why, one, the very real world setting, people could relate to it. You know, if they've watched kind of ER or Grey's Anatomy, like we joke and call it Grey's Anatomy, the board game, because it's not really about the medical stuff; it's about the person and the story that emerges. So we wanted to create a theme that would appeal to an audience who aren't necessarily playing games, but then we had to create mechanics that were also relatively accessible for people as well. And that's how the whole kind of bundle kind of ties up together. Because I think the interesting thing about the play in that setting, and I'm trying to relate it to like other games, is you become invested. You're not, especially for something emotional, like in and I think it's why, well, people were telling us why we shouldn't make this game, is because it's okay to sit back and watch something else that's emotional and has a reaction.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to be in it. Like I don't want to feel it or be responsible for those decisions. It's stressful, and I think that's, you know, one of the comments about the game is that it's stressful.
I think one thing I like to think about it, Rory, is when we were making it, I sort of dived into Brenda Romero's stuff a bit. And for folks who don't know, Brenda Romero is a games designer who has done a lot of very, very different games, I think is the best way to describe her. She's probably most famous for Train, which if you just look up Brenda Romero Train, you will see the entire story of it. I don't want to go spoiling it for people. But one thing that Brenda describes is people don't play her games; people are complicit, and I think that's what we sort of like we're trying to aim for. Like again, it's not the this game is an experience thing. We never wanted to go that far. We still want it to be a playable game, but I do like the idea of having the people who are playing it. It's not just I am person A and I am playing this game to win this game. We wanted them to sort of like take a little step further into the world and almost become like a little bit complicit in this universe where Billy existed as a person. Well, and I think we did pretty good at
it. Stephen, I wonder what you think, because I think becoming emotionally invested is a better way, to me is a more accurate way of describing it and ties it to play. Because, complicit is one thing, but I think the point of holding on is you become emotionally invested. Like the decisions you make, you start like haggling over them far beyond what makes any sense, like in the context of the mechanic. And I think at that point, you've been drawn into this imaginary world. The same happens with role-playing games as well, where that to me is why you could argue it is play, because that's what's happening. You're thinking beyond the boundaries of the rules, and you've become emotionally invested.
It most definitely is play, and I would say it's funny in sort of staid and typical and traditional board games. You talk about, did this game have meaningful decisions? Did I have agency in the game? Well, this is that idea, but taken to a much different end result, right? Because your decisions have meanings that land with emotional resonance, not just resonance because I get to pick up cards or score points. Like you said, that the tension between, I have to do enough to keep Billy going, but I really want to pursue his story, and I know that that's what he wants me to do in some sense in order to come to some sort of resolution. And having that metagame experience where it was, you would have camps divided between which way to, we have to keep him, he's going to die if we don't, do this. Like, well, the death is inevitable. That's not a question in the game. And that knowing that each decision that you made had weight, not in a Euro game sort of heavy game kind of weight, but that it lands with a weight, I think underscores what you're saying about the emotional impact that the game can have, not just within the mechanical sense, but it leads to that discussion and that greater experience that's even beyond it, that one sort of leads to the other.
So and this might be a kind of an interesting way to kind of wrap things up at a certain degree. Like, you, more than I think most people, got what we were trying to do with the game, and I'm curious. So it's kind of got me thinking about this idea of, like, we created an invitation to play, right?
Absolutely.
But you totally grabbed it like full hand and got it and became invested. But there's lots of other people I've spoken to were like, no, there was something there that they couldn't transition into the full experience. And so that's kind of bringing me back to that concept of play, that there's certain things you're willing to let go of to engage in the spirit of, maybe that's like in the spirit of the experience.
Yeah.
Whereas others they're still up here and they can't, they can't.
Is it a matter of permission? We talked about that several before, that you're permitting yourself to kind of open up in that way, and there are people that are just going to be nope.
Yeah, that it's either not safe, or it's a muscle I haven't exercised in a long time. It's hard for me to do that. It's kind of, it's just because it's always kind of been interesting. Like as a reviewer and a player, there's people out there who are like, this game really kind of touched a nerve, and then there's others who are like, nah, just didn't do it.
Yeah.
At all. But I'm realizing all we can do as designers is create an invitation. I think for that kind of experience, I think especially with this kind of experiential game, we can create an invitation for you to engage with it, but you kind of have to meet us part way to step into that, to kind of go, oh, I see what they're trying to do here. Okay, and step into it. That is not required with other board games. I think you get to stay in your head with the other games.
Maybe that loops around to what Michael was saying about complicity, because it sort of makes you complicit with that. There's the invitation, and the minute that you accept it, you are kind of complicit with the experience that you're going to go through, not in some nefarious way, but that you're accepting responsibility for this experience that you're going to go through. And if you still have to open that door, though, and does that sting more than, I would feel like it's more akin to like you having written a book or made a film, and some people just get it and just love it. Some other people are just like, nope, that's just not a thing that I'm interested in. But it still has to sting. But
well, it stings. It's kind of like that parallel with the dexterity game, where the response generally isn't, I don't get it. It's not good. And extremely vocal in that regard. And I think that's, so it makes me want to push harder to create kind of more. Remember, I said in spite of myself, to kind of do more of that, so that because there's people out there who love this kind. Like, I actually put a poll up on Board Game Geek, which I'll flash up because I haven't seen what the results are, on Board Game Trading and Chat UK, where I asked, like, when you play, why are you playing games? But I think there's a lot of people out there who haven't engaged with games because they're cerebral, like, and they're like, I don't care about that stuff. Like, I don't care whether I've like made loads of money by managing ore and moving it around, and so games just haven't spoken to them in any kind of meaningful way. And I think there's still a lot of work to do of like putting out like offerings to people and say, well, games can be this, games can be that. What is it that kind of appeals to you so that you find your thing, and we actually shift games out of this kind of like trap that it's in at the moment.
But
but
it inspires me. I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, I hope that you pick this up and run with it. Even if you don't, I guess this might be a question. The concept seems so solid that it's not really even tied to the mechanics. It's more about if you find a person or a situation that you want to invite people into, that then you have to maybe marry it to the right set of mechanics, or maybe you do see it as a system that you can find experiences to pull into the system itself. But honestly, I looked at it and went, wow, as a writer, I was like, gosh, I could think of, people or things that suddenly are open to this exploration in a way that I can't even I couldn't even describe to you in terms of how I would make it into a game right now. But suddenly that door was open to me and going, oh my gosh, that could be a game where I hadn't even thought of that as a possibility before.
I think that the challenge right now is the economic viability.
Well,
and that's like something would have to shift in the current form of it to make that work. But we totally have our list of other characters that we want to have people meet and be kind of challenged by.
If we could, we would.
Yeah.
And if we can, we will. I think that's probably the easiest way of going about putting that forward, I think. So should we wrap it up there, folks? It's nearly top of the hour. This could have been like a 2-hour one. It's long even for us. Stephen, I'd like to say thank you very much for your time. And as always, it's lovely talking with you. We would love to have you on again as well to talk about all manner of things. It would be super cracking to get back together with you. Do you want to do some shameless plugging to wrap things up?
Sure. First, thanks, and it's lovely to see your smiling faces. I miss you all. Nice to see you in person and get to talk shop, because I don't get to do that as much as we would otherwise. So much love to you two across the pond there. And I yearn for the day when we can be together and raising a glass and playing some games together sometime in the near.
It'll happen. By the way, was that a beer you had earlier? Because I know you do like the good beers.
I do. It was just a glass of green tea that looks just like beer. It's a little early.
Step it to it. Come on, it's past 5 o'clock somewhere.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Shameless plug. So you can find out about the media that we do at thespiel.net or majorfun.com. You'll find out about all the different reviews that we do in both of those places. And if you want to find out more about the overarching organization that I'm in charge of and that encompasses the media network and all the things that we do for the charity, go to thespielfoundation.com.
Cool. I'm going to put that in so people can see. Rory, if you can vamp for a moment, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
I was going to say, I think with your reviews are just so incredibly considered.
Thanks.
To me, when I read them, it's like, you guys have played this game, you've thought about it, you've talked about it, and you've really kind of formed an opinion after giving it a good testing. And whether that's a major fun game, which is actually, everybody, if you're looking for really great fun games, check out anything that has a major fun award. It's like the kind of gold standard. You're going to get a good game.
Yeah, it's like the Nintendo seal of quality in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's my phrase indeed.
Well, I think you've got the you kind of got the experience, I think, to kind of properly review them and give meaningful feedback on it as well, which is what makes a difference.
Yeah. Well, and we only do 22 reviews a year, so there's hundreds of games that we play for every one that actually makes it to the light of day, and I think that's makes all the difference. Is we find the ones that we really love and we really think there is something salient and interesting to say about before we put pen to paper or start talking about it. And that's as much as you gave me love for finding the core of Billy Kerr. It heartens me to know that that's coming through, because that's certainly our goal when we do the reviews, is for people to know that this wasn't something that we just played once and hit go on the mics, or rattled off just our random thoughts, that we're really taking a lot of time and effort behind every one we do.
I think we got to get you and Ben Maddox back on at the same time.
Get ready for like a 17-hour show.
I'm game.
Yeah. I would just sit back and watch the two of you talking.
Hey, when we want to do the 24-hour podcast, that'll be the one that we do.
Oh man, that'll be a fun fundraiser.
God, yeah, we'll do it one day. It'll happen.
Yeah.
Spiel Foundation.
Okay.
All right, well, we're going to wrap up there. Thank you very much indeed for joining us live on this one, folks. We truly appreciate it, and it's always lovely to have you with us for our roller coasters of discussions. Rory and I, of course, will be back on Friday. We're doing some more Prism Arena testing, hurling more monsters at each other.
Some tweaking on our Numocon.
Good stuff will be had by all. I'll be back on twitch.tv/IdleMichael tomorrow morning as well, 11:30 UK time, for, I don't know, probably going to be talking about sell sheets or something. Definitely not going to be panicking about pitching at all. Lots of panicking. You'll be fine. But yeah, we'll catch you soon. Have an awesome rest of your day. And this is now, as always, Where We Wave. Goodbye, everybody.